Hey, 8th graders. So we are starting our first review lesson for chapter 2, preparing ourselves for solving equations. So our first lesson is about order of operations. You may know it as PEMDAS. I tend to avoid PEMDAS, and we'll talk about that as we go into what order of operations is. So order of operations is the order in which we complete our operations. That way, everyone comes up with the same answer and not a whole bunch of different answers. So our order of operations starts with our grouping symbols. Now these symbols can be parentheses, which is why people tend to use PEMDAS, because a lot of times they are the parentheses. But they can also be brackets, the little fancy curly brackets. But they can also be fraction bars. And we have an example where we use a fraction bar as a grouping symbol. And this is why I tend to use the term grouping symbols over just parentheses, because it's really anything that groups operations together. We should do those first. From there, we look at our exponents. And I want to evaluate all exponents. Remember, an exponent is how many times we multiply something by itself. So if I have 3 to the 5th power, then that is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, not 3 times 5. So just keep that in mind. That's where most students mess up when they're doing exponents. So make sure you are multiplying the number by itself. Now, number 3 is two things at once. We multiply and divide from left to right. So whichever one comes first from left to right. This is the reason why I avoid the term PEMDAS. And the reason is when we do PEMDAS, which you do not need to write it, but this is where most people on social media, when they do these problems and they're like, I'm getting 1 and I'm getting 9 or whatever it may be. This is where they make their mistake, because when we do PEMDAS, a lot of people think that that means multiplication comes and then division. And they forget that we should multiply and divide with whichever one comes first. So just keep that in mind. And then our last one is add and subtract. Again, from left to right. So it happens at the same time. If my subtraction comes before my addition, then I subtract before I add. So you just have to keep in mind multiplication and division happen in whatever order from left to right. Same with adding and subtracting. Once you've gotten it down to just adding and subtracting, we do it from left to right. All right, so now from here, we're going to go ahead and start the process. So we're going to start with our grouping symbols. Here we have a set of parentheses. When I have a grouping symbol, what I do is I look inside that grouping symbol and I start my order of operations process over again. Ours is just 6 minus 2, so there's no other operations but to subtract. So 6 minus 2 is 4. I tend to, for the first time, keep them in the parentheses, and then later on I take them out. So here we have 4 cubed, so that is 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. So I have equals 64 divided by 2. And yes, this is the type of work I want to see. I don't want to see 6 minus 2 cubed divided by 2 and then have an answer. We need to have step by step. Got it? From here, 64 divided by 2 is 32, and that is our answer. And we used order of operations to do that. All right, next one. Here is where the fraction bar is being used as our grouping symbol. So we're going to group So in this case, once I know that I have the grouping symbol, this is where I start my process over again. Within that group, I don't have any other groupings, so then I have the exponent. So that's what I'm going to do next, is my exponent. And so 2 to the 4th power, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. So we end up with 16 minus 1 divided by 5. And so again, we're still within that grouping. After exponent, I'm going to do my subtraction. And so now I have 16 minus 1, which is 15. So 15 divided by 5. And then we go and we do our division. And so 15 divided by 5 is 3. So we end up with the fact that this simplifies down to 3. And we're just using those order of operations to get us from step 1 all the way through until we have an answer. All right, last problem. I have no grouping symbols. I do have an exponent, so that's going to be my first step. So 5 times 7 minus, and then 4 squared is 16 divided by 2. From here, we look for a multiplication and division. We do those from left to right. So starting at the left, we have 5 times 7, which is 35, minus, and then 16 divided by 2, which is 8. So we have 35 minus 8. And then from here, we do our subtraction. So 35 minus 8 is 27. And that is our final answer. So again, we didn't have any groupings, so we moved to the next one, which is exponents. After we evaluated our exponents, we went from left to right looking for multiplication and division, and we evaluated those as they came. And then we did our addition and subtraction, which was just a subtraction in this case. And that is our order of operations. So until next time, deuces.